Welcome. Today's presentation, we're going to continue talking about React Native. And this presentation is going to be a continuation on our discussion about navigation with React Native. Or basically how to add navigation to our mobile applications, web applications, or however we're wanting to interact or move between pages within an app. So last time we talked about using React navigation and how we could use the stack and the stack navigator to actually add some screens to a nice stack flow so that we could interact and jump back and forth between an application. So for that, we had to install some dependencies for Node and Expo. Those were the React navigation native dependency and the stack dependency. We also included some optional dependencies like the reanimated, the gesture handlers, the screens, the safe area content, and the mask view. Now, for today's presentation, we're talking about tabs. We're going to need the native and the stack, but we don't need the optional dependencies. We'll also need one additional dependency, and I'll talk about that later as we go through the presentation today. The bottom section here is essentially the libraries that we had to import within our project and the new stack container and stack navigator and stack screen tags that we used for customizing our application to include screens and button navigations to go back and forth between these screens. So today we're getting into tabs. And as the definition on React Native, it's possibly the most commonly style of navigation in mobile apps is tabbed navigation. Now, tabs can be on the bottom of the screen or they can be on the top of the screen. However, this is kind of dependent upon the type of device you're using. So if you're using iOS, Apple products, all the navigation or tab navigation is typically defined at the bottom of the screen. Now, when you're dealing with Android, most of your navigation is at the top of the screen because they typically have button navigations at the bottom of the physical device that you can use to go back and forward between your applications. So the requirements that we need to include today is we need to make sure that we use the native component that we installed the React Navigation native for our project. And we also include the React Navigation bottom tabs. Now, I know I mentioned before that depending upon your application or depending upon your device, your tabs could be at the top or the bottom. Well, with React Native, the library itself is just bottom tabs. And the bottom tabs are going to be, it's just a library for tabbing. When you run React Native on your device, the tabs are going to conform to the nature of the device. So if you're on iOS, it'll be at the bottom. If you're on Android, it'll be at the top. So you don't have to actually customize the location of your tabs. And then when we create our applications, we need to make sure that we import the navigation container like we did before for the React navigation so that we have the native component. And we also want to import the create bottom tab navigator from the bottom tabs libraries. All right, so let's get started. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to install a new application or we want to create a new application. So we're still using Expo, so we'll use Expo install, or I'm sorry, Expo init. And here we're going to create a new application called sample tab 6, since this is our 6th presentation on React Native. And it will take it a second to get the libraries and prompt you as to what template you want to use. So to start with, even though there is an example here with tabs, for now we're going to start with just a blank application. Take just a second to install. There we go. All right, so now this has created a new project. So to access our project, it tells us how to start. So we're going to go CD, sample app 6. And if we look in here, we have all of our React Native code or React Native project that we need. Now, because we're using Expo and we need to use, or we're going to add tabs and navigation, we need to also install those libraries. So I'm going to go to my little cheat sheet here. There it is. And I need to install all of this. So need React Native. And I need step. Now, the reason we have to install these every time we create a project is it installs the libraries for these components into our project. That way, when we run our application in Expo, it will actually load these dependencies to the mobile application as well. Right? Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to start Expo. So we will do Expo start. And open up another tab here, and I'm actually going to open up the code in Visual Code. All right, Expo started. Let's select our iOS device. Let's do iPhone 8. And there's our iPhone 8 emulator. So I'm going to minimize the console. We don't need that now. Move this guy over here. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to open up our app.json. Sorry, app.js. There we go. That load for a second. Give it 1 moment here. All right, so as you can see, when the application loaded, we have our input status bar, which is what we would expect for using Expo. We always have to import our React because React Native is built on top of React. And then we also want to import some basic modules like style sheet, text, and view. Now, the other thing we need to use for React navigation and for our tabs is we're going to have to import a few more libraries here. So we'll import navigation container from React navigate. All right, and then we also need to import create one tab navigation or navigator from React navigation. bottom tab. Now, if I save that, it's going to fail because I just remembered I did not install the React navigation bottom tabs. But what's cool here is it tells you that your error message is pretty distinct. It tells you, oops, we cannot find this library within our project. So to fix that, you go out to your console, you stop the server, and copy this guy right here, and do an Expo install. Oops, not that one. We want tabs. There we go. And don't mind these package errors. I'm finding that having the new MacBook Pro with the M1 chip, it's giving me some fits with some libraries, but overall everything does work. All right, so we're going to restart Expo. And then once that starts, we're going to reload our app. So our app just reloaded. And it's bundling up all those JavaScript libraries, including the new one we just installed. So now our app actually loads. All right, so we've created a new project. We have imported our navigation container, and we've imported our create bottom tab navigation or navigator. All right, so now we need some screens. So we have our base screen here that is defined inside of our app, but we don't want to hard code our screen in our app. We want to actually kind of pull those components out into separate functions. Let's create a new function and call this one screen1. And we'll create another one, screen2. All right, so screen1 is going to return. And inside our return, we're going to create a new view. So actually, I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to copy this view here to start with. All right, so we have our view. We're going to use our styles. Instead of container, I'm going to create a screen style here. And down in my styles, we'll add screen. And he'll be flex1. And we'll keep the alignments the same, but we will drop the default color. And justify. Yep, okay. So we have our screen1. And our text, let's just label or print out, okay, we're in screen1. All right, we don't need the status bar, so we'll get rid of that guy. And let's just copy this code for screen2 and change it to screen2. All right, so we've created two functions or two screens, or two views, I'm sorry. So view 1 is going to give us a view with some text called screen1. And function 2, or function screen2, is going to return us another view with screen2. So right now, we just have two components here with two views that aren't really attached to the application yet. So before we can actually attach them, we need to add a constant. And let's call it tab. This way we can now reference the create bottom tab navigator by using the tab constant. So instead of having to type this every single time, we can now just call tab. So now let's go into our app here, remove this view, start fresh. So now let's look at our code. So before we had to create a navigation container, so we still need to do that. So we'll come back over here. So the first thing we need to do is add our navigation container. And inside our navigation container, we now need to add our tab navigator. So to do that, we're going to use our tab constant, and then we're going to do tab dot, and we're going to go find screen. Now, the tab screen is a self-closing tab with a couple parameters or attributes. It has the name attribute, and it has the component attribute. Now, name is going to be our unique identifier, which is how we're going to reference this screen or this tab throughout the application. So this one, we'll call it screen 1. And we'll add the component being our function here of screen 1. And we'll do this again for screen 2. Now, if I save this, I forgot one thing. All right, so we have our navigation container. We need to add our, not navigation container, we need the tab dot navigation container. And, oh yeah, and I need the navigation container. Native. Oh, whoops, there it is. Sorry about that. Sometimes the error messages are not super clear on what it is that's wrong. I forgot the open close parentheses to load the constructor for this component. There we go.